Shall we say hello?
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
So we're here to look at positive regard and explore that with you. So should we introduce ourselves first then, Nicole? Yeah.
Yeah, I see many familiar faces, but not all of you have been here last time. So I say a few words. Thank you, Paul. I'm Nicole. I'm situated in the north of Germany, in a little village near the city of Hamburg, by a lake, and spring is just exploding here, and I'm loving it. We have had sun for weeks on end, and it's really nice. So that's what I'm looking out into, is my garden, and I planted new flowers, and I just love it. The coming back of nature and this thriving, and this spices in the air is just amazing. I am a PTSDA in the field of counseling, so training and supervising transaction analyst under supervision, and I do have a, as you would say in the UK, a training institute that is my own, and I'm the only trainer there, although I invite guests from time to time, and I run one training group, and another one is just in the process of forming. And I am a consultant for organizations doing coaching and team development, facilitating team development processes. So very much in the organizational field, although I'm in TA terms, I feel belonging to the counseling field, because my interest is most in, is it an English term to say personality development? So personal development of people, and support them even in team development processes, to have a look at resources and what everybody can bring, and support, create a frame in which people can thrive and develop. And I'm very much working, or most of the time, I'm working in a co-creative manner, because I experience that this is the most supporting for teams, and in coaching as well, where especially the being in the process together is so important, and the relational space that we talked about last week. Yeah, and I'm very happy, Paul, to be creating the frame together with you for this time, speaking about and reflecting on and mulling on together on positive regard. I'm really looking forward to this with all of you, and being with this other hat on the presenter's chair, so to say. It's lovely. I'm looking forward to this.
I know most of you, for those of you who haven't been to one of these or don't know me, I'm Paul Robinson, and I work in the UK. I live in France about half of the year, which is where I am at the moment. We have training groups in the UK, and I do a lot. Well, I did used to do quite a lot of training in Russia and Ukraine, but not at the minute. Although we're doing quite a lot of support for Ukrainian TA people at the moment, helping them deal with the situation. And I use co-creative TA all the time. And I'm an educational CTA, PTSDA. So my thing is to support people to learn, be it personal development or in organisational context. Yeah, well, it's nice to be running with Nicole the last of the workshops on the tenets. So we begin to move on, I think, next week or the week after, into some of the models. Now we've covered all the basics.
Yeah.
So
speaking of,
you guys, do you want to just say who you are and say hello to the group and just tell us what co-creative TA you know? Just then we've got an idea.
Hello, I'm Shadell. I'm a third-year student and I'm at TAC TA Cymru. I'm with Sparkles and I am feeling my way forward, working out this co-creative thing and how does it fit with me and how do I fit with it. And I'm thinking very much about my section 2 for the diploma.
Okay.
Okay. Good to have you here, Shadell.
Thank you.
Right.
It's great.
Sorry, Shadell. What you'd finished. So I'm my nickname is Sparkles, so I just tend to like going by that these days. So I've done the last 2 or 3 workshops and I've seen some of the recordings. I'm really enjoying getting to grips with understanding rather than just reading a book, talking about it and discussing it. It makes it real. I love the weeness. I love the integrated adult. There's some bits I sort of struggle a little bit to chew over, but I'm getting used to the whole thing. And I think if I can get a grasp of the whole thing, it'll make those bits I'm finding a bit more difficult easier. And it's nice to be here again. I have to say I'm very tired, so if I'm quiet, for some reason I'm feeling very tired this afternoon, but I'm still glad to be here. And I'm at TAC. I've done my diploma and I'm just starting to think about CTA.
Wow.
So for Nicole's benefit, TAC is in Wales.
Oh yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Lovely. Good to have you, Sparkles.
Thanks.
Come on, don't be shy.
Good evening, almost. Good afternoon. Or good evening to you, Paul, because you're and you're on European time, aren't you? So good evening to you guys, more or less. So I'm David. I've been rocking up to various TA programs with Paul since 2010. Co-creativity has become very dear to me because that's the sort of central tenet on the basis of which I bring up my sons. So yes, it's a different style of parenting to what there was before. I'm here this evening because I'm doing a workshop at said conference in April on exploring how transactional analysis can be used to support intersectionality in the public sector, which is kindly supervising me on. And we've agreed that we'll narrow the field down specifically to, in terms of what we use as TA, it will be co-creativity and its facets. And having picked up that there's not an awful lot written on the positive mutual regard in regard to co-creativity, as I understand it, it's not in the Tudor Summers article anyway. I thought it'd be very useful to deepen my own understanding. That's me.
Great.
Well, there's a good enough reason, David, for us all to rock up to said conference, to come and listen to you.
Thank you very much. It's lovely.
I'm Amy. I am, well, for co-creativity, I'll just explain for anybody who's missed. I'm currently sitting in my car. I have a school drop-off to do, so at some point I will just go onto my screen and mute and go off my screen, and then hopefully rejoin you guys at about 5:15 when I can be fully present with you all. And really wanted to be here today. You just mentioned, David, about there not being as much written about the positive mutual regard, and of course we've got the man himself here, Paul, so hoping that it'll bring that as alive as some of the other facets that there's more written about. And I'm a clinical year 3 trainee, halfway through my diploma, done my written and the oral to go. Co-creativity very much part of my practice. For those of you who've met me before, surprisingly, I always say I'm in a co-creative group, and it's amazing what has seeped into my practice from that. So loving it. Very excited here David, about bringing your children up by it.
Mm.
It's messy.
Yes. Yeah, but it in some ways it's good because Leon's 6'2" and I'm only 5'7".
Brilliant.
Hi, I'm Fran.
Okay.
I'm really new to this. I signed up. I did want to do the one last week, the Weenus one, and my interest was sparked by James Sweeney, who's my my supervisor. So I wanted to find out a bit more about everything really. But I'm very new to it all, and I'm done my UCATA diploma from Wealdon College, and yeah, we'll be doing my CTA when I get round to it. So yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. I will have to periodically not come out, I'll still hear, but I'm in my kitchen and the children will be coming in and out to get stuff. So if I go off, it's because of that.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know, Fran. Good to have you.
I'm Sandra. I'm in Manchester, which is North England. I have a private practice and run a therapy centre, not a training centre, a therapy centre. I'm writing my CTA and I'm keen to sort of like, I find learning in this arena better for me than just reading. So this is like, feels far more interactive and it's more experiential. I can get my head around it. So this is ideal. I haven't made all of them, but I'm making as many as I can. And I want to make a disclosure. Last time and the time before, I said nothing. And I've spent the last few days really irritated that I've not said anything. So I'm going to try and correct that and be part of it. And I think my fear around not saying anything is, yeah, but I might get this wrong. What if I've got nothing to add? How do I know what my opinion is? You know, I think as much as anything, I'm here to try and find what my opinions about things might be. So I think that, you know, I've allowed that to silence me. So I'm going to try and do something about that this week. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And it's interesting that you say, as I didn't say anything, I wasn't part of it. I want to be more part of it because I really remember you from last week, and I do remember your presence from last week, even if it's in this two-dimensional space, and even if you feel like you haven't said anything, I sense I did get a sense of you last time, interestingly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm loving these sessions. I think it's a fantastic way of getting connection and learning and stretching. I'm really enjoying them. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, you're very welcome to contribute whatever you want, energy or words or smile or question mark on your face or whatever.
Hi everyone, I'm Victoria, or Vic. I'm a first year student at Connexus Institute in Brighton. I haven't been to any of these sessions before. I don't really know anything about co-creative TA. So yeah, really interested to hear what people have to say and people's experiences, and particularly drawn to the positive regard side of TA.
Right.
Okay. Good to have you, Vic. Are you frozen, Paul? Yeah. Are you there, Paul? Can you hear us?
I'm here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Shall we say something to about the other three co-creative principle and do a bit of contracting? Paul?
Yeah, should share my screen if I can find it. Here we go. So we do just run through the principles to make sure everybody's either that if they don't know them, they're new, they're there, or just a reminder before we get into it. So the first one is weeness, which is I think what we did last week, wasn't it? So we looked at weeness, which is about being together and using all the resources that we've got available, and freely giving those and being in relationship and offering what we've got to offer.
Yeah, the next is shared responsibility, which doesn't mean equal responsibility, but shared responsibility. And one way to look at it is shared responsibility for the process. So for what's going on in the room, and the contribution part is in here as well. And what I really like is this notion of shared responsibility for my own learning process. So I don't have to see that as I'm alone in this learning process. And Sandra, you gave a lovely example of sharing what you've been pondering on in terms of contribution. So you can use us as a group for whatever you need to make that step that you said you want to make in as I want to hear myself speaking and learn what my opinion is. I really like that. And you can ask for feedback as well and use the group, and that's an aspect of shared responsibility as well. So you don't have to do it by yourself. And yeah, the winner's triangle by A.C. Choi is helpful there in as accessing your potency, being with your vulnerability. Maybe you dare to express it as well, and access other resources that can support you and us through the process.
I think it's really interesting in a learning context. It's quite really challenging to share responsibility for learning, because we've learned to be passive learners for about 16 years at school, if not longer. So it's quite challenging to begin to take responsibility for our learning.
And it can be challenging to share responsibility from the leaders of learning perspective to give away this or to step down from the pedestal that you might stand on lecturing, and be there in the circle with people and be curious. Welcome, Harpo.
Which is a nice move to talk about being present-centered.
Yeah.
Because very often teachers and learners neither of them are present-centered, because they are both adapting to what they know. So it's very often a symbiosis where the teacher knows everything and the learner, the student, is just there to soak it up. So it's quite a power differential, and that's really important in co-creative TA, that there isn't a power differential, and it's about being present-centered rather than in our script, or being bound or being defensive, non-consciously defensive. And I thought Sandra was brilliant. Introduction, being vulnerable and present-centered and not defensive, and yeah, really present. You brought yourself into the room, Sandra.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And last but not least, we're So these are the three that we spoke about. The three tenets we spoke about are written about by Keith Tudor and Graham Summers, and my dear friend and colleague Paul Robinson, whom you all know now, at least now, who's sitting next to me on the sofa, so to say, said, well, there's one thing missing for me. And he added, Paul, you added respect and unconditional, mutual, positive regard. And that's our topic for today. And I said that a lot of times, but I say it again, I'm really thankful for you putting this in the row of 3 and make a 4 of it. Because I think, and I know we talked with Graham and Keith about that, and they said, well, for us, it's somehow in the other ones, but it's not explicitly. So I really think it's important to say that explicitly. And this is like a catalyzer for to get into we-ness and shared responsibility and present-centeredness is the positive regard, unconditional positive regard. And what we say here is from an okay position, and we will explore this within the next couple of hours, and I'm really looking forward to that. It is about courage and vulnerability and showing vulnerability as well, and about intimacy maybe, and giving and receiving strokes. So we will dive into that more in this workshop, and I'm looking forward to that. And I want to say, as I'm in a positive regard mood right now, I really want to, I loved it when you did that last week, Paul. I really want to bring our friends in here, Bev Gibbons and Berit Farland, Tryon Bossenmeyer and James Sweeney, who belong to this group of 6, and if we count Keith and Graham into it as well, of 8. Maybe ambassadors of co-creative TA, we could call us. A bit grandiose, but still, we really love co-creative TA, and we're working co-creatively together, and that's great. And that's our colleagues who do this program, or whom we do this program together with. And I just want to say, it's good to say it explicitly, to agree on confidentiality in this workshop. So whatever you learn about other people's stories or what they share stays in the room, and whatever you experience and what you find, and what your inspiration, what's the inspiration you take away, that's obviously for you to share, not to name other names and people or quote other people from here.
And we might be creative with us, so we can only offer the space. But you've got to be. So we invite you to join us and into we-ness and sharing the responsibility and present-centeredness, and in terms of positive regard.
Yeah,
Nicole,
that's right. You need to say the last sentence again, Paul, because you
story to start us off. Okay, I think Nicole, this bit, or
just the last
this bit.
2 sentences, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so I believe Nicole has a little story about Nicole and myself to share with you.
Yeah, I will, Paul, and that's an introduction, and I just want to add one last bit in terms of contracting, and that is with our invitation to join us in this co-creative space. One part of shared responsibility, or your responsibility, is to really take care of yourselves, and whenever you feel disturbed or moved by anything, let us know, and just we can together see how we can support you to process that as far as possible. So the story is a story about, it was funny when Paul and I, when we had this conversation for preparing this, we were coming up with this, do you remember once upon a time in Berlin? And we together remembered a story that we experienced, or that we were in together. And we both found it's a story about, or it's a story about positive regard. And in 2016, we were in Santiago de Compostela doing our TW together, our training endorsement workshop. And Paul had the lovely idea to invite all 16 participants, writing an email to all 16 participants, or to those he had the email addresses from, saying, how about meeting up 1 year later to check in with one another and see where we got to after 1 year after the training endorsement workshop. And I got an email half a year after Santiago from Bev Gibbons saying, well, look what Paul sent, did you get that as well? And he invites us to organize a meeting. And I said, well, that's great. That's really something I looked forward to have a peer group, an international peer group. But I didn't receive this email from Paul. So he might, well, he sent it to certain people and obviously not to me. So I would love to go, but am I allowed, or does he really want me there? So that was a question. And nevertheless, I sent an email to Paul saying, I would love to join in. And Paul came back in an email saying, wonderful, I'll put you on the list, and then we see what happens from there. Then comes July and the World Conference, or IATA conference in Berlin. And Paul was there, and Bev was there, and Tryon was there. So many, many familiar faces. And I was still sitting there with this feeling of, was it really okay for me to write an email to Paul saying I would love to join in? I was still sitting with this feeling, am I invited? Am I welcome? And that's, as you might assume, and you assume right, that's one of my really deep script topics. Do I belong? How do I belong? Am I welcome? And so that was triggered in me. And I sat outside the restaurant where we had the examiners' dinner, and I said to James and Bev, I really sit with this thing and I don't know, and do you really think Paul wants me there? And I think he's got a quite stern face, and when he looks at me, I don't really feel like a connection, and maybe he was cross with me. And so all these thoughts, and I shared them with Beth and James, and very cleverly they said, well, the only person with whom you can find out is Paul. And I thought, oh my God, I can't bring that into context, can I? Oh God, oh God, oh God. And then it happened that Paul and Debbie and I and others were sitting around a round table for dinner. So Paul was opposite me, and the table was rather big, so we couldn't talk, but I looked in his face almost all the time. So when I looked straight on, I looked at Paul. And after dinner, before the puddings were served, I thought, okay, now. And I got up, I walked around the table, and I bent down, or I got down, so I was on eye height, and I said to Paul, I really need to share something. And I felt my face going red, bright red. And I said, I'm sitting here and I feel something in me is triggered, and that is this very old wound of I'm not welcome. And I really want to check with you whether it's okay that I answered and said I would love to come next autumn. And the answer I got was a hug.
And I didn't do hugs then.
Oh,
Yes. And on Paul's end, Paul didn't do hugs at all at that time. Yeah.
So we thought that was a really good example of positive regard.
it's wonderful.
Yeah. And for me, it's positive regard in many directions. First of all, it's positive regard. There's a lot of positive regard in the whole story, and it's positive regard towards others, but also towards myself, and Paul, for you, towards yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I would be interested. I know I notice I would be interested in what resonates with you when you hear that story.
Gosh, I'm so moved hearing that. And that sense of it just encapsulating, I nearly said what we've learned, but you know, those tenets. So the vulnerability, the honesty, the courage of crossing the table, the courage of staying with that heat as it's going up you and then being met by something you don't normally do. There's a beauty to it. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, thank you, Amy.
I would say that resonated so much with me, but I haven't felt that bravery that you felt to move around and take that opportunity.
Your voice is very low, Fran, so I
Oh,
can
yeah.
understand you, but
Okay.
it's like I would need to go like this.
Yeah, I can go and get I'll go and get my microphone in a minute.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So could you say again what you just said,
Yeah,
please?
no, I just said that for me, it really resonated, that sense that, well, for me, I feel fear that I won't be understood. So I really admired your bravery of taking the chance to unravel what was going on for you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think with positive regard, it's easier for us to work, to consciously work and give other people positive regard. It's really difficult to do it for ourselves and regard ourselves internally with positive regard, because we are so well defended. We've grown up being defended to keep ourselves safe. So it's even more difficult to acknowledge the positive parts of ourselves, because doing that, you've got to deal with a lot of negative script beliefs to be positive about yourself.
Yeah.
That's something that I could really hear in your story. Not only just the courage and the vulnerability, but the difference between the archaic, I don't belong anywhere, so I won't belong here, and your willingness to be here and now, the present-centeredness, that actually, yeah, I do belong, I'm being hugged.
Yeah, and same for you, Paul, in this situation. So you didn't get
I'm sure.
You didn't get your white horse out of the stable like the rescuer's horse going da 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 da. Of course, you're welcome. Da 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 da. But you stayed with what was what felt to me like being touched by this question, and then you didn't, or you did. I'd rather speak about what you did and not what you didn't. You went with this being touched and came from there instead of not seeing that being touched. And that was quite something.
Yes, what I'm thinking, or I agree with everything that's been said, and I was very moved by the story that your awareness, Nicole, has allowed you to be aware. You've worked enough to know and recognize your don't belong. And then you've been challenged by people. Okay, the only person, they've shown regard themselves by saying, well, the only person that can help you sort this out is Paul. You've shown regard to Paul to even be brave enough to and feel that he would accept you. And then he's shown it to you, and you've shown it to yourself. And I was just thinking how sad it is that so many people would have just projected in the first place, he didn't want me here. And the amount of people I've kind of ended up working with who think someone doesn't like them, but that's absolute, it's just all their own stuff, but they're not aware enough in the first place. So it's amazing what therapy does, bringing the awareness in. Absolutely. And then we can make different choices, can't we?
Yeah, and I think that's what the tenet of unconditional positive regard, when we work with people, invites to more and more be aware of the split off or the script parts, and own them, and don't own them. I think that's what I wanted to say, and be with them and integrate them. But when we look at the integrating adult, that's what happens then. Yeah, and even now it's interesting. Even now, by your resonances, I sense that this. I wasn't aware of that, interestingly, Paul, when we said, okay, we're going to share this story. I wasn't aware that this would be another bringing it out there and being vulnerable and showing, oh, this is my soft spot. And it feels so much more natural nowadays. And still I notice, oh my God, what have I shared by all of you being touched? That's another, I perceive that as positive regard, and that has a healing effect on me as well. So, and what I'm saying is that I notice this truth of, as a leader of learning, I don't really like that, but as a presenter, I'm a learner too, always. And I just love this. And I thank you for your, positive regard.
As you were just speaking, Nicole, oh, sorry.
No, go on, you carry on.
As you were just speaking then about owning our script, which in itself is a beautiful thing to do, but then you're saying being with those parts and integrating them, I had that sense of, and this is weird, the in-between. So we've talked about what's between us as people, but then there's something about what's in between the good bits of our script and the not good bits of our script. And there's, just what you said has given a loosening of that one maybe gives access to the other somehow.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, Amy, if this don't belong injunction, or I'm noticing that the don't belong injunction turns into something positive, in as when I own this and say, okay, there is a soft spot and a wound there, and I dare to bring that into contact, then it will turn into something beautiful. And I still have the wound, but I'm not saying I'm thankful for the fact that I had this lack of sense of belonging as a child, but I'm thankful that I can develop the awareness for my belonging today. And I wouldn't probably, if that was natural for me and normal, so to say, so no script issue, I wouldn't have had this experience. So I'm sort of thankful. And how is script then? And that's what I mean when I say integrating and owning script. It can turn into positive experiences.
I got the tingles then when you were speaking. Really powerful.
And if Nicole hadn't have had that positive regard and been vulnerable and been prepared to do that, she wouldn't be doing this now.
Yeah.
So I hope it was a good thing, Nicole.
Great, absolutely fascinating. And I think that when you say, Amy, or your reaction, I think positive regard, and we've been there in the preparation, sort of positive regard for the child that I've been, and for the survival strategy she or he developed back then. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? We wouldn't be here if we wouldn't have had this experience, probably. So
back to that honouring of the script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And same for you, Paul. I mean, the path that we've gone together since then in our group, I think for all of us was really transformational. And that's, I love the term honoring the the little ones we've been.
And I think it is that is to honour how smart we were, you know, to deal with what we dealt with, to work things out in the way we did, and find a mechanism to get us to here. So it's worth just thanking our little selves for enabling us to get here. And now we're here, we've got more choices. So it's, you know, I always say, be thankful for your script because it got you here. But the thing now is, what do you don't have to stay with it, you can change it. So you can do things differently if you've got the courage.
And I think, Paul, interesting that you phrase it like that, because I think everybody does have the courage. We just forget about it sometimes, and we need to find it. I think courage is something that all of us have.
And I think the good thing about co-creative TA is that you're invited to have the courage to be in the room, to be in that we-ness, that present-centered relationship, in that positive regard. That it is okay to be vulnerable. And the more you are prepared to be vulnerable, the more that you don't get as scared being vulnerable, because you don't actually get what you expect in a way, because you've been in that defensive place because you were, as a kid, you were scared of getting rejected or not belonging, or and feeling that awful feeling that you didn't want to feel anymore. So the more that we can invite people into the space, and the more that they accept the invitation and you know, have courage to challenge the script belief. And one of my big ones was don't be close. So it was really challenging when Nicole came across to me.
And then you don't see that now, but I'm
No.
6'2" tall, and Paul is not. So that standing next to each other might have added onto this, right?
Yeah, I had to stand on my chair to give Nicole a hug.
Sorry,
So,
I
yeah.
interrupted you.
Go on, Dave.
Yeah, I had a situation where for the first time in an email yesterday, I pushed back with mutual positive regard when I hadn't received it. And part of that for me, I think, is the idea about if we allow people to treat us in a ways that we don't want to be treated, they'll think that's okay. So I pushed back with the way that I wanted to be treated. And the situation was that we'd been asked to get our timesheets up to date on the computer for the end of the year, the end of the local government financial year, like the end of the 31st of March. And with the dodgy instructions that I'd managed to set up duplicate timesheets in the system. So I had an email back from the system administrator that was basically saying, it wasn't offensive, but it was clear, David, you've duplicated these sheets, you're not okay. That was what landed with me. So I went back to him, said I was sorry, explained that I'm a kinesthetic learner. I learn by doing. I really need somebody to show me, could we organise that? I then got an email back to saying, and it started with, David, I think you're overcomplicating this. And I thought, well, I've been vulnerable here, and I don't, I received that as, David, you're still not okay. So what I went back with is I used the methodology that he then explained to me. He didn't offer me training. He still said, look, it's really simple. You just do this, you hit close, da, 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 da. So I checked that out using my own kinesthetics learning style by doing it. I wrote myself a little pathway on a sheet of paper so I won't forget it. I confirmed back to him that's what I'd done. I'd taken his advice, thanked him for it. He said that he deleted the duplicate sheets for me. I made a point of thanking him for that. And also he said, that he would be setting up the next year's timesheets for me in April. So I thanked him for that. So I really came back with wall-to-wall, mutual positive regard, thank you. No response back. But I've come back to him, showing him how I want to be treated.
And how does him treating you in the way he did feel now?
Well, I feel that it's still not entirely okay with me, but this is an organisation that is not TA literate. I'm having occasional conversations with the OD manager, who's very, very busy, and I know that she'd love TA to. They're looking at languages for the organisation, and TA is on her shortlist, but she's not sure whether she can make it happen. So it's not a TA literate organisation at all. So I suppose in my mind, I adjust and I think to myself, well, X is not TA literate, and I can't expect, he wasn't offensive. He didn't mean to be offensive.
Well, that's two different things, Dave. Sorry for interrupting you, but he wasn't offensive and he didn't mean to be offensive.
Yeah.
Is two different things, because what I hear you saying is what he wrote to me sounds quite offensive, although he might have not meant it that way.
Because I discussed it with somebody else who's a trainee therapist, who sort of said, well, he might have been joking. How do you know he wasn't joking? And I said, well, I know this individual. Okay, we're working remotely now as an email, but I know the individual, and we don't have the sort of rapport such that he would joke with me. So I suppose, so you've asked me how I feel. So how I feel is that I wasn't done to as I would have liked to have been, but I've gone back and I've asserted how I want to be treated. So hopefully I've put up there, hopefully gently and appropriately, how I would like to be treated in the future. And I feel that I can do no more. It'll be interesting to see how he reacts to me in the future.
Yeah. I would love to hear others, what others think about that, because I'm pondering, but I will share what resonates with me later, but I would love to open up the space for people first.
Well, I can hear that you've got regard for yourself, and what you're doing quite clearly is, this is how I want to understand things, because I don't understand it how you've put it out. So you've modeled to him how, basically you would like to be treated, or receive communication, whatever it might be. And I can hear from you, yourself, you're I mean, I'm not hearing that you're angry, but you want to be in an okay sort of space.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not received, because it's that a knowing feeling, isn't it? When someone isn't really quite responding, because you're also in the unknown. As you were saying about, well, I don't think he was joking, because that's not his personality, to do that. And yeah, for me as well, usually I don't like to be in the unknown, and well, okay, how is this left things? But I feel what's really important right here in this moment is that you have taken care of yourself, and let the rest, trust in the process. That's what I feel like saying, because I feel like I gel with you a little bit there, where you think, hold on, that's not good for me. So what is good for me? How about I demonstrate what's good for me? So at this point in time, you've done the right thing.
Thank you.
For you. Yeah, you really have. And I'm really hearing that these little barriers that come up are really our own. And it's for us to deal with, because it's not really anyone else's business, is it? Does that make sense? I mean, of course it is, when you're in that communication. But first of all, we've got to look after ourselves and make sense of it for ourselves. That's because I feel I've got your struggles as well, and we've got to make those changes for us, not changes in the way of, this is going to be better for me. So how about, I just actually love the way you've modeled how you want things to be done. So I that's the most important thing I want to say to you.
Oh, thank you.
So I think it's a really good thing, and that's what I'm hearing. Stay with it and keep doing it.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I noticed that I asked people to respond without asking you first, Dave, if you wanted any responses.
No,
and I said, fire away, people. But
I'm sorry.
No, thank you, Harper. No, and thank you, Nicole. No, that's great, because people could look at this. We had this wonderful session with Paul and Debbie not so long ago about is perception reality. And, I'm very sort of taken with the idea that, that there is probably no external reality. It's all about, it's all about perception, and it's all about your frame of reference. And I suppose, reflecting on what Harpal was saying, what for me he's done in a way is he's crossed a bit of a line, because I'm TA literate and my frame of reference is TA oriented. And so how I want to be treated I've been banging on about positive mutual regard now for some years, and I see that that's the tenet of how I think we should be treating each other in organisations. And I had a conversation with somebody, a colleague, who was carrying out an investigation into somebody's behaviour on one occasion, and I explained to her about positive mutual regard, and I suggested to her that if people aren't acting within the limits of positive mutual regard, that maybe there is an issue around behaviour, inappropriate behaviour and conduct. And she thought that was interesting, but it landed with her. Actually, she really did take the idea on board. You know, and it's this question of, you know, how do we define standards of behaviour within organisations? But ideally, yeah, in my mind, we would treat each other with positive mutual regard, and the workplace and the world would be a better place for it.
And can I ask you something, Dave? I'm wondering if it would be possible from an intention of positive regard to tell another person, I don't want to be treated like you treat me now, or I think your behavior is I perceive your behavior as quite offensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like if we could, so is a constructive critical feedback also possible from and that's more a meta question, it's not directed to you.
And I think it is. And funnily enough, in the last couple of months, I've done that with my service manager, who I know quite well. And again, there were some things where I really felt he was discounting, and he did it twice in short succession. And I sent him a very polite, gentle email, which was worded, keeping myself in adult and letting him know that, you know, without saying, mate, you've crossed a line, that this had upset me, and
Yeah.
and so I you know, so yes, so once again it was about thinking, I'm not okay with how I've been treated here, but unlike the other colleague, he's aware that I'm doing TA. He's also a workplace coach as I am, so he should be rather, you'd have some expectation that he'd have some alignment, and in principle, without discounting the other colleague, but in principle, because of that training and that learning and that development, I would hope he'd have a better understanding and be able to be more sympathetic.
Yeah, and I'd like to be provocative and say positive regard is not the same as friendliness. It doesn't necessarily have to be friendliness all the time, because I can be in positive regard and tell you, so another, that I perceive your behavior towards me or others as not okay.
Mm-hmm.
What do others think to that? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that I think the question is that positive regard. Well, I think if you are being treated not with regard, and you hold yourself in positive regard, then it's not okay to adapt to it. Yeah. So it's about treating ourselves with positive regard, that we don't deserve this. Yeah. And if you use the winner's triangle to go back to them, and you don't persecute them, and you, as Dave did it, he was vulnerable by saying, I can't learn like this. Yeah. And would you do it like this in future? You know, it's not about being negative and being persecutory or being defensive. It's about treating ourselves with positive regard, that we don't have to put up with this.
I was thinking about it from working in an organization. There's two things that I've got in my mind, that I've been on the receiving end of emails that are completely short, sweet, and a very blunt, and you're like, well, who the hell are you talking to? And then you actually meet the person and they're not like that at all. It's that method that somehow allowed them to be. But then I was also thinking about, you were just saying about having positive regard for ourselves. It's, as a line manager, having positive regard for your colleagues, but being able to say what's not okay. And that's difficult, especially if the other person that you're talking to doesn't have regard for themselves. Then it can be perceived as massive criticism when really you're trying to help with their personal growth. I do think that we can say to somebody from a positive regard position in myself, but it may not be received that way if the other person hasn't got it for themselves.
And that's what communication is about, that we can't know what the other person's reaction to what I say might be. I couldn't know that the answer would be a hug. I didn't know.
Yes. So could we then say that positive regard is also the antidote to games? Positive regard to yourself, therefore you don't get involved in a game playing, and when you are invited into a game, having positive regard to be able to say, well, not necessarily to verbally cut across it, but that might be appropriate on occasions, but to choose to step out of it and choose to do something in a different way. So therefore positive regard is the antidote to games.
Yeah.
And it's also an antidote to how we run our own racket.
Yes. There's also something about contracting. If we're going to use contracting as one of the central tenets of TA, then we need to be able to operate in positive regard. Otherwise, our contract is automatically false.
Yeah. And you need to be in I think it's helpful to be in positive regard to address the psychological level of a contract and be willing and able and courageous enough to share your vulnerability, your fears, your expectations and such. Yes.
So therefore, it seems to me that what I'm really thinking is that without positive regard, we can't be effective in any aspect of our lives. We have to have a really active form of positive regard to be able certainly to work, but to be able to manage our own relationships with congruence and authenticity. Then it's a central, don't have it, doesn't happen.
Yeah. And I do know, Shadel, I know some very famous coaches and trainers here in Germany and in the world who seem to me, who are on stages holding lectures and gathering crowds of thousands and thousands of people around them who cheer them and who really take away inspiration and learning from these events, where when I'm in one of those events, I don't sense positive regard whatsoever. It's like projection from a lot of projection from the audience and a lot of grandiosity from the person on stage, and still people take away learning. So I wouldn't say it's positive regard is a prerequisite for change necessarily. It's what I want to bring into the world to create a frame for change.
Me too.
Does that make sense, Shadel?
Yes,
so
it does.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you pointed that out. To me, it's such an obvious thing that we have to start from a place of positive regard to be able to do anything authentic and intimate and congruent. Good.
A question. What's the difference between the concept of positive regard and I'm okay, you're okay, which I thought was the basis of TA?
Sparkles, you've been in our preparation session. That's great. It was lovely to have you there.
Good question.
But before we go into that, Sparkles, because that's our invitation for you guys to go into breakout groups or have a think and come back here. But I think what Chidel was going around was that if we are in positive regard and we actively using it, we have to be present centered. Because we're not in script, we're not archaic. So if we're in positive, we are actively in positive regard. We are in our integrating adult because we are connected with those negative script beliefs. We're connected with the games and the rackets that we run to protect ourselves and maintain that defense. And if we are, like Dave was doing, thinking it through and responding with positive regard and positive regard for himself, he's come out of an archaic place. He's actually present-centered and he's been thinking presently, from his integrating adult, and he will have drawn on his experiences from the past to what's the best way to respond. And I always think that thinking is really good to be present-centered, because if you're really thinking, you can't think in the past. You can only think in the here and now. If you're really processing, it's sort of it's a must-do access to being present-centered.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about a start of project that I had this morning, where it's a team development process that we're starting, and the manager said there is a conflict between 3 people of the team that needs to be addressed before we go in the whole group workshop, and I agreed, and I said, okay, we can do that. So I had conversations with all 3 people one-on-one, and then tomorrow I will have a conversation with the 3 of them together. And the manager said to me, "You will, why do you only take 45 minutes for the one-on-ones?" And I said, because it's not so much about content, it's more that they have an experience of being seen and heard and listened to, that they are able to pick up their courage to share and be willing to be really open in the meeting where we're all together. And I can create this space within 45 minutes. And it was interesting. I was very much I was present-centered, and at the same time, I had the preparation for tonight on my mind. So I was there and I asked them questions about that. And all 3 of them at the end said, I didn't think that this conversation, that I would tell you so much. And I didn't think that this conversation I would feel so accounted for and seen. And I really do feel seen. And so I don't necessarily need to tell them, I'm addressing you with positive regard now. So that's what I'm doing. And that's my principles. I don't have to explain all of that. But just by the experience, people get a sense of what they get when they trust in this experience within the relational space. And I think that's why that links with the present-centeredness, Paul, because I didn't go with them into what happened and tell me what this person did to you and da-da-da-da-da. Nothing of that. I just talked to them about the here and now. And it was interesting that they said, I didn't tell you the whole story, and I didn't need to, obviously.
I mean, I think, so positive regard comes from Carl Rogers, unconditional positive regard. who developed person-centered psychology, and in person-centered, they talk about conditions of worth, yeah, which is a very, very similar concept, that other people are worthy of positive regard, and we are worthy of positive regard. So yeah. So we're getting back to this little exercise we've got for you, I think.
Yeah. And would it be handy for people to have a short bio break before we go into Sharple's question?
Yeah.
Would that be all right? So maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
So we've got a task for you to explore. Should you be prepared to take the challenge? And you can do it in a couple of breakout groups, or we can do it in the big group, whichever you would rather do. Nicole kindly wrote it down. So
yeah. And Sharple's kindly spoke it out, read it from our notes.
Without knowing.
Yep. So is there a difference between okayness and positive regard? Yeah. So well done, Sparkles, for guessing it. If there is, what do you think is the difference? And if so, if there's a difference, how does it feel? And can you find a metaphor of an image to represent that feeling? Do you want to say more, Nicole? Because is that enough?
I'm just aware that Amy just got in while you were saying it, so I would rather repeat it.
I was listening. I could hear on the other one. So good. Thanks, Nicole.
And I personally would find it nice to have that to do that in breakout rooms first, and then come back and have people share their images. You might want to Google and find an image that represents or that shows this metaphor, maybe. But I'm also open, of course, if you say no, we want to do it in the big group, that's okay as well.
And you can draw it on a piece of paper and hold it in front of the screen if you want.
So what do you think?
How
do you want to do it, guys? Are you up for the challenge?
Up for the challenge. My preference is always a bigger group, but that's just me.
So your preference would be what, Fran?
I said I'm up for the challenge. It sounds really interesting, but my preference always is for a bigger group.
A bigger group.
Personally, that's what I prefer.
But I didn't know whether it was a big group or groups. Yeah.
I'm going to challenge Sandra and ask her what she wants, because she didn't say last time.
I think I'd like to be in a breakout room and mull this over out loud with other people.
Okay.
And I'm happy to go with the majority, obviously.
And perhaps we can do both. Perhaps we can have a smaller breakout room and a bigger group. And everybody's.
We would have 2 breakout rooms, I think, with 4 people each, and then come back to the bigger group and share.
Sounds good.
How about that? Okay. So,
are you clear about the task?
Yeah.
So could somebody tell me what they think it is?
Yeah.
You would like to know the difference between positive regard and okay and okayness. And also you would like us to find an image or a metaphor to represent what we think that is.
If we think there's a difference.
Yeah. So So
What it
it's
feels
about
like.
the metaphor is about the feeling you get about the difference.
About the difference.
But the feeling. So is there, how does if there is a difference, how does that feel?
How does it feel? Yeah, that's it.
And a metaphor for this feeling. And I would suggest 15 minutes as a time and a minute to come back. So you will get a 1 minute warning before you're pulled back into the big room. Is everybody ready to go?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, see you in 15 minutes.